Good afternoon, everyone. Um, I hope you are all doing okay. With just a reaction, could you confirm if I am audible?
You are audible.
Awesome. All right. We are going to continue from where we left off last week. We were busy with a temporary data set. We were also using an ADO command. So before we get into things, are there any questions that you want to ask? Any clarifications required?
Sir,
Yes.
can you please explain the temporary data set to Rebecca for which query?
Okay. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, let me first start off by saying this. For every table that we have in our Kruger Park database, right? For every table that we have inside our Kruger Park database, there is going to be a corresponding data set. And with this statement, here's what I mean. We can see we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 tables in total. So it means we are going to have 9 data sets and each data set will be associated to a particular table. For example, we are going to have data set of accommodation types, data set of camps, data set of camp types, data set of clients, and so on and so on and so on. Again, for every data set, we are going to have a data source. So it means out of all those 9 data sets, we are also going to have 9 data sources that relate to individual data sets. And then now, we are going to provide you with 2 additional data sets, which we will call ADODS Temp 1 and ADODS Temp 2. Now, all these 9 data sets which are originally given to you, all of them, they will have a select statement, meaning they will have a command text that associates each data set with a particular table. If we could just quickly look at tutorial 2 and show you what I am referring to, like this. For every table in our database, we are going to have a corresponding data set. And if you go through all these data sets, they all have a select statement that is associated with that particular table. For example, DS wildcard has a select statement that selects from a wildcard table. Tariffs selects from tariffs, sightings from sightings. All of these data sets, they will have a query that associate themselves with a particular table. Now, we will also give you 2 temporary data sets. The purpose of these data sets are to execute any other query which is not part of these other data sets. For example, queries like determining the maximum sighting ID, those could be done using this temporary data set, because originally or ideally what we do not want to do is we do not want to modify the queries that are provided for us inside this data set. So we will always be specific in our question. We will say, let's say it's question 3.1 or 3.2. We will say implement ADODS temp or ADODS temp 2 to execute a query that retrieves this information, that information, and whatsoever. Or we could also just say implement an ADO use query 1 component to execute a particular query. So ADO DS temp 1, DS temp 2, ADO use query 1 and use query 2. This will be this will be used as per instruction given. Again, you are not supposed to just use them whenever you feel like it. Read the question first, and the question will tell you which component to implement. So these extra components they are just there to help you execute any other queries that are not the select all from a particular table. Is that okay?
So will the queries be like given to us like on the command text or?
No. Thank you for that question. Thank you for that. Let me quickly just show you. This is tutorial what 3. I want 3B. Let me quickly just demonstrate for you again. All right. So as you can see, these 9 data sets, they will have a query given, like select all from wildcards, from tariffs, from sightings, rangers, client wildcards, lines, camp types, camps, accommodation types. But when we come to these extra data sets, you will notice there is no command text. Why? Because we will want you to write a command text, probably something that has to do with getting the maximum sighting ID or whatever the question may ask you to retrieve from the table. So with this extra data set, we'll always want you to write the command text, open it, and then also, as you can see, you have a data source there. We'll always also ask you to write or to join this data source with this data set. But for the others, the queries will be provided to you. These extra ones, we will not provide a query because a query will depend on the question that will come. Is that okay? Again, if we take a close look at these data sets, they have the connection already specified. The connection is already specified. And also what I am going to do, even with the summatives, I am just going to avoid confusion and just connect all this extra data set and use queries to a connection. So you do not have to do the connection on any of these components. I will give everything already set up. But when it comes to the command text of ADODS temp 1, 2, or ADO use query 1 or 2, there on the command text, that's where you have to come in. Is that okay?
Yes, I think so.
Okay. All right. Any other question? All right. So just to recap on what we have done, we have created a button that is going to insert a new record into our table using SQL. Again, I want you to pay close attention to the wording there. When we say perform something using SQL, we expect you to have a query component somewhere, a query element somewhere. We expect you somewhere to write a query to achieve that particular objective. But now, if we say using no SQL, which we are also going to look at in today's session, that's where we do not want to see any of these queries like select or whatever the case may be. We expect you to do the same objective but using data set methods. Right. So proceeding, as you can see, initially I am now saying my temporary data set, which is that additional data set given to me. I am now saying take the connection from the existing connection of ADO connection. Now, in your summative, you may want to ignore this line because I will do this for you manually during design time. So your job will not be to start there, but to start here. So now, because we want to change a query to this data set, we want to start by ensuring that the data set is closed. And then once it's closed, we can write our command text, which resembles a query. And then after writing that query, we can execute that particular query. So now in this case, the idea was we want to insert a new ranger in our table. And to do that, we need to assign a new ranger ID to any new ranger that comes in. So what we do is we get the maximum ranger ID that is there currently in our table. After getting it, we then want to increment it by 1 so that the ranger that we are going to add does not have the same ranger ID as someone else. So as you all know, a ranger ID is a primary key in our table. Therefore, it should be unique for each and every ranger. Awesome. So as you can see, we could have used any other data set or probably the Rangers data set. But we notice that if we use the Rangers data set for this objective, it means we are going to lose the given select all from Rangers. And who knows, maybe somewhere later on we might need it. So the temporary data set is then available to help us execute these temporary queries. So that's why we need to give you additional data sets called temp1 or temp2 to help us execute these temporary queries to perform a certain task. Okay, and then we went on to write our insert statement using parameters. You can see we said insert into rangers table, and then the values we said these will be parameters. Okay, and then this means that when we assign this command text to a particular component, we should be able to give these parameters some values before we can execute the insert statement. Okay, so again, dmod ADO command component, we were using the ADO command component, which is only used to execute DML statements. And your DML statements refer to your insert, your delete, your update, and your alter. But never mind the alter, I will not ask you to alter anything in the table. So put your focus on the insert statement, the delete statement, as well as the update statement. So for this particular question, we are dealing with insert. Okay, so after hooking up the ADO command with our existing connection, we now specify the command text, the query that this ADO command should execute at the end of the day. So we are now saying it must take the command text from the ANSI string object called DML. And what does it hold? It holds a insert into rangers. The values are parameters, meaning values are still going to come at a later stage and they will be binded to these parameters. All right, now that we had hooked up our command text, we later go on to define those parameters. And by define, I mean we are going to give individual parameters some values. So the first one, we are going to say get this parameter on our ADO command called RI. it will know where to reference this RI because we have hooked up our DMS statement on our command text property. So when we say in the ADO command, we want to set some parameters. And the name of the parameter which we want to set is RI. And the value which we want to bind to this variable is the ranger ID which we calculated at the top there. Additionally, we do it again for the second parameter. We say now it must get the name from the EDT name tedit. Similarly for say name, for RA, can't remember what RA is, rank, okay, for rank, and then the date appointed, which we will get from a date time picker component. And then finally, our report camp, which we are going to enter there. And then now that we have our parameters defined, meaning we were able to give these parameters some values, we can now go ahead and execute the query. And to execute a query using the ADO command, we use the method execute, which is a void method, meaning it will not return anything. Why? Because usually when we execute a DML statement, the only thing we get from it is one row either deleted or inserted or updated. No, so we will always just say dmod ADO command execute, and we know that we have inserted one row or one record. Then we just display a show message there by saying one record successfully inserted. Now, after doing this, we will not instantly see the results. So what do? So we now say the data set which is selecting all the information from rangers, that data set we want to deactivate it. We want to say close that data set and open it again. The reason why we are doing this is to ensure that that last record which we have inserted can now be selected by the query of this data set. Remember, this data set will always have a select all from rangers. So once a new record is inserted and then we say active equals to true, what does it do? It reruns the same command text which is select all from rangers. And then what does it do? It finds that new record that was inserted. And then here we are just telling the data set to go to the last record so that we can indeed see that that record has been inserted. That was just a walkthrough of what we did previously. Are there any questions before we go to the update part? Sorry, not the update part, but before we, okay, maybe we'll do it using a data set that side so that you can see the part of using SQL and not using SQL. So I will take your silence as no questions, we can proceed. Is that fine? Using no SQL. All right, so now here's what we are going to do. We are going to update a particular ranger. Let's say, okay, I'm not sure if you are using the same database there. Let me just double check. Let me just check the last record we inserted. Okay, yeah, we have myself inserted there. And then now when we update a record, I want us to update this ranger maybe promote this ranger to now be a section, to now have a rank of section using no SQL. Awesome. So to do that, we are going to check. Number one, we want to iterate through all the records. And then on a record of Langa, we want to update his rank. And then we will do all of this using no SQL. So we are going to use dataset methods. Dataset methods. Awesome. So this is my approach to this problem. Number one, I want to iterate through all the records. Number two, I want to check on a particular record if we have Langa. And then once we find Langa, we want to update his rank to section. Great. So now let us start. So to iterate through all these records, we are going to use the method of first, meaning we are going to inform our loop to begin on the first record. On first record. And then we are also going to use the property EOF, which means end of file. Check if our loop has not reached the end of file. And then we are also going to use the method next to inform the loop to move to the next record. Great. So we have a for loop there. A for loop has three sections. The first section describes the starting point. So we are going to say this must start at the first record. And very importantly, sorry about that. And very importantly, ladies and gentlemen, always just make sure that your data set is open, because otherwise you will not be able to access all the records. So always ensure that the data set is open. Okay, because if it's not open, then we are not going to be able to move from first up until we reach the last record. Okay, so once it's open, we are now going to tell our for loop to begin where? At the first record. So this will move the record pointer to point to the first row in our data set. And then the condition here, we are going to say, please continue as long as we are not at the end of file. So it means we are going to put the not operator there, which will say loop as long as you are not at the end of file. And then if you are not at the end of file, what do you want to do? We want to move to the next record. We want to move to the next record. Then that will be our for loop. You can also rewrite this as a while loop by saying start by going to the first record, and then while we are not at the end of the file, what do we want to do? We want to do some things. But then later on, we also want to move to the next record. So this will be the while version of this for loop. So I will just comment it there for those who may need it. And then that's good. So we have our second step coded. Now we want to check if the record that we are on is at least Langa or Relebogile, whatever value that you can use to determine that indeed we are going to update this person or this ranger called lang. So now here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to have an ANSI string object somewhere that is going to hold that ranger say name for me. Let's see, ranger say name. So I can just choose say name. You can also choose name. It's also fine. So what I'm going to do is, as we are looping record by record, like it's going to start on the first record, then I want to check, is the say name Langa? If it's not, it is going to move to the second one. So it's going to be checking these say names one by one as it iterates through record to record. So I have to start by saving the record. So how do I obtain a value of a particular field or a value from my record? So you will notice that this loop is going through record by record. By record by record, I mean line by line. Okay, so on each record, there is a ranger ID field, there is a name field, there's a surname field, a rank, and so on and so on. So I am now going to say, get the same name from my data set, and then that same name is going to be found by using the function or the method field by name. Field by name receives an ANSI string or a Unicode string which represents the column where you want to obtain a value from. The column. So in this case, I want to obtain a value from the say name column, which is this column here. I want to obtain a say name. So I'm going to say get a field by name, get a field using the name of the field or the name of the column, and that name of the column is say name. And then retrieve for me the value as ANSI string, because I am saving that inside an ANSI string object. So I will say retrieve this field for me called say name, and when you retrieve it from me, please give it to me as an ANSI string. Okay, and then from here, what we want to do is check if this person is the ranger that we want to update. Remember, we want to update the ranger lang. So we are going to make an if statement there to say if say name is equals to lang. Then if this is the case, it means now we are pointing, or we are currently at the record of lang. Okay, so now if this person is Langa, what do we want to do at the end of the day? We want to update his rank to section. Okay, so now when we get into the update part, it is very important to realize that what we are updating on a data set which has modes. Let me comment that there. Data set has modes. Okay, by default, the data set is in a read-only mode. Data set is on read-only mode. And by read-only, what do I mean? I mean that we can only read from the data set. We cannot change information on the data set. We can only retrieve or read the information on that data set. So now, what does it mean? It means for us to update, we need to ensure that the data set is in the correct mode. We need to ensure data set is in appropriate mode. And what is that mode? The edit mode. So when we say the data set should be in the edit mode, what we are now saying is we are telling the data set to move from the read-only mode to the edit mode, so that we can do what? So that we can edit the information that is there on that particular record. So now it means when we are iterating through this data set, what we may want to do ultimately is to ensure that before we change anything, our data set is in edit mode. Okay, so we are going to do this at a top level because we do not want to edit every time we hop onto a particular record. We just want to say at a top level, the data set should be open for editing. Does that make sense? Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Sir.
Yes.
So I said that edit function is built in, or are you
Yes.
calling it from somewhere?
No, it's a method of this data set. Each data set has a method called edit.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, sir.
So you can say it's built in, but it's built in on our data set.
Sir,
Yes.
when you like where you positioned it, when you open it, it will affect everything because of when I was doing it, I put it within the loop so it can affect the records within the loop. Or is it
You
fine?
mean the edit?
Yes, the edit.
Okay. If you put it in a loop, ultimately what you are saying is every time it goes through every record, it must take it must make the data set to be editable on each
Yes.
record. While you could just put it at a top level, because even if you put it there, all the records are in edit mode. You can edit whatever record that you want.
Okay, understandable then.
Okay. All right. Now that the data set is in a mode that allow for changes to be made, we can now go ahead and make changes to this particular record where Langa is found. So now we want to make changes to the rank. So what we are going to do is we are going to say dmod. Then we are going to say ADODS1. And then we want to put a value on a particular field. So we will still use the field by name. So at this point, what are we changing? We are changing the rank value. You will notice that the rank value initially is filled. So we want to promote Langa to become a recruiter or a section. Okay? So we are going to say we want to make changes to this field called rank. Now on this field, we want to assign a new value. So you could always say as ANSI string and then you do your equal sign, or you could always come and say value and then you could assign whatever value that you want to assign to that particular column. So you have preference there. Let me just write it in two ways and then I'll comment one out. So here we can always say as ANSI string, and then when we say that, it means whatever value that is going to be on this right hand side, it must be an ANSI string. So when we say value, you could assign anything that you want there, but it must be in alignment with the data type assigned on this rank column. Okay. So you are welcome to use whichever one you want there. And then we will say the value that we want to put on this field called rank is equals to section. We are now updating Langa to become a section ranger instead of a field ranger. Okay. So great. So that will go from record to record, checking if the surname is Langa. And then once it finds that the surname on that particular record is Langa, then what do? We assign section to a rank in our data set. Does that make any sense? Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
All right. So this will be our update using NoSQL. As you can see, we are just using a data set to go through record by record, and then we are checking for a particular value on that record, and then if it's the same, then we want to change a column or whatever the question may be into the given value. So this will equate to as when we write our update statement. So obviously we'll say update ranges set rank is equals to section. No, I'm just showing you how the query would have been like the DML statement. Set rank is equals to section where say name is equals to blank. This is how our SQL would have been written. This is how our DML statement will have been written. So now we said no SQL. It means we do not want this. We do not want this. Rather, we want that. Okay. So now, once we have updated that ranger to section, what we now want to do is to make the changes permanent. We want to make the changes permanent. And to make the changes permanent, we are going to use this method called post to say whatever that was modified in the table, let it be permanent. So this will be the same as when you say commit in your Oracle SQL. When you say commit, we are now equating it to when we say post in Jet SQL. Is that fine? Is that fine?
Yes.
All right. So now we can just inform.
Yes, sir.
We can just inform the user that we were able to update that ranger by using. Today I'm going to use a message dialog. A message dialog. So now, looking at a message dialog, it says, I want to receive a Unicode string which resembles the message that the user is supposed to see. And then we are also supposed to choose the type of dialog that we want it as a pop-up. Okay? Then we are also going to choose the buttons that are going to appear on this message dialog. And then lastly, there is a help context there, which will always use it as 0, or will always pass 0 to it. Okay, so let's start with the first argument. We can say successfully updated Ranger Langa. Okay, so that is the first argument. So the second argument is the type of dialog which we want. The type of dialog. So there are many types of dialogues. We have empty confirmation. Okay, let's quickly just do an F1 there. Cannot get it. F1 there on message dialog. Topics. Message dialog. Okay, so we have empty confirmation. So these are the types of dialogues we can have, right? We have a warning, we have an error, we have information, we have confirmation, and then we have a custom. Okay, so in this case, what we want to do, we just want to inform the user of the changes that we have made. So we are going to use empty information. Okay, and then the next step is to include some buttons. So let's see if we can get buttons somewhere. Back. Buttons there. So these are the available buttons which we can choose to either show or not show on our message dialog. So we have modal button, yes, and then we have modal button no, modal button okay, cancel, abort, retry, ignore, all, no to all of that. And each modal button has a modal result. By that I mean if we say yes, it means there is a result called modal result yes. If we clicked on no, there is an MR no result that is returned to us. Yeah? So maybe in another example you will see that. But for now, we only want the OK button. Nothing fancy. Something has been updated. We just want the user to just click OK. Yeah? So to do that, I'm just going to use a T message dialog buttons class. So I'm just going to pass it like that only. If I wanted to add buttons to this class, again, I will use the this operators, the extraction operators. Is it the extraction? I can't remember. But we are going to use these operators to choose the buttons that we want. For example, MB yes, MB no, MB cancel. These are the types of buttons which we can have on our T message dialog. So now in this case, we do not want any additional buttons. We just want the default button, which is OK. And by just including this class or this instantiation like this, or this constructor call, we can only get the OK button. So that is all there. And then lastly, the last parameter is the context, which is assigned to 0. Great. So this will only give me the OK buttons. But if I wanted other buttons, I need to specify in this format. Okay. You can also specify the OK button just like that as well. Still OK. So let us try to compile this and let us see the output that we will have. Okay, so if we could just have a look there. So Langa is a field. So when we say update, what should happen is this field should change to section. And if it doesn't change, then it means we did something wrong in our code. So it says dataset not in edit or insert. Okay, so we put our edit at a higher level, and it seems like it needs to be on each record as the gentleman had suggested earlier on. So I'm going to try and put this inside a loop. I'm not sure why it needs to be done like this, but let us use the approach used by the gentleman earlier on. Okay, so let us try to update. So it now says successfully updated the Ranger Langa to section. So if we look there, I am now a section Ranger. But most importantly, the message dialog. You could see at the top there it is written information. Why? Because we chose a message type of information. If it was a warning, it was going to write warning. If it was confirmation, it was going to put confirmation there. Again, because it's information, it also puts a nice picture for us there of I that represents information. And then this is our message which we wrote. And then this is the default button that comes when you call that constructor. Awesome. So to be corrected, it is going to be important to put the edit inside our iteration, because I think now once it moves to another record, the data set becomes locked again. Meaning it goes back to a read-only mode. So we need to ensure that every time we access a record, we make sure that the data set is open. So thank you for that correction, to the gentleman who suggested it. All right. Any questions here?
Yes, sir. And message dialogue.
Yes, sir. Or you want me to go through the message dialogue again? Okay.
No, I have a specific question, sir.
All right, sir.
How do I include a variable in the message dialog as part of the first argument of the message dialog function?
I'm not sure if this is what you are referring to, but we can have something like message, assign it there, and then when we come here, we just call that variable there. Something like that.
Okay. Okay, I see that one. Let's say this, I wanted to concatenate the MSG with another message in quotes. Do I use the plus sign? Okay, I'm asking because I've done the same thing, but still getting yes, like it's underlined with red.
On this part.
Yes.
Could you put the cursor on the underlined word? Then it should show you what the error is saying. It could be that you misspelled this
No, you know what?
dialogue.
I think I need. I see my. It's, I need to convert my integer into a string. Okay, I see
Okay.
it.
All right.
Yes, thank you, sir.
All right. All right. Any questions on what we have done? The updating of a record using NoSQL. Silence means no questions. Yes.
On that for loop statement inside, can you please explain the EOF things there?
Okay. EOF means end of file. So this is the property that is used to check if you have reached at the bottom of your records. At the bottom of your record. So now what we want to check here is, have we reached the bottom yet? If we have not reached the bottom yet, what do? Move to the next record. So it is going to be starting from the first, moving up until the last record. But our condition check will always be, are we at the end of the file? If that is not the case, go to the next record. But if that is the case, then stop the loop. So this is just a property that can check for us if we iterated up until the end of the record.
Okay, thank you, sir.
All right. All right. If there are no questions pertaining on this, I would like us to quickly move to the delete part. So delete part, we can also say using SQL or no SQL. So if we say using SQL, we are going to tell you which data set to implement, meaning which data set to use. But if you say no SQL, then you are stuck to using this particular approach. So which one do you want us to do? I think the using no SQL is important because the other one, you're going to write a query and then you just execute. So let's look at using no SQL. Delete Langa using no SQL. Awesome. So the steps which I am going to take is I want to check if the record that I am at is longer, obviously. So it means number one, open a data set always. Ne? Number two, iterate to data set. And then what do I do? Check if we are on Langa's record. Something like that. If we are on Langa's record. And then delete Langa's record upon confirmation. So before we delete, we are going to ask the user, are you sure you want to delete this ranger? And then if the ranger presses yes, then we delete. If the ranger presses no, then we cancel. We do not delete. Okay, so that is my small algorithm pseudocode. Then I need to implement it in C++. So I am going to start by checking if, or by ensuring that my data set is open. And then I'm going to create a loop that will iterate through record to record. So dmod ADO dataset 1 move start at the first record. And then we are now going to say go to the next record as long as we are not at the end of file. So I'm always remember to put the not operator there to say move to the next record as long as we are not at the end of file. Awesome. So now we have a data set iteration. Then now we need to check if the record that we are currently at is Langa's record. So we are going to also have an ANSI string object again, ANSI string. So for now I'm going to use name just for the sake of clarity, and then we are going to get the name from the data set using field by name method, and then I'm going to say name. That is the name of my column, I hope. Yes, name. And then I can say I want this as ANSI string. Okay, and then I'm also going to check if the name is equals to that one, and then if they are the same, then we can delete. We can delete the entire record there. Great. So before we delete, we want to ask for confirmation first, right? So the only way we can ask for confirmation is to use a message dialog. And then we say, are you sure you want to delete this ranger? Right? And then the type of dialog which we are working with is empty confirmation, because we will want confirmation from the user. The buttons which should be displayed, so I'm going to call the constructor there, and then I'm going to give it the following buttons. I can give it MB, no, MB, yes, T message dialog buttons, yes, and then I can always put a 0 there. So this is a message dialog that is going to ask the user, are you sure you want to delete this ranger? And then as you can see, now we have 2 buttons, and previously I had said each modal button has a modal result. By that I mean if we click no, there is a result that is returned to us which is called MR no, modal result no. So it means here we are going to do some conditional check to say if the person presses no or yes on this message dialog, then we want to take a particular action. So it means I am going to make this message dialog on an if statement. Okay, on an if statement. So now I'm going to say, if this message dialog that has yes or no, if yes is clicked, then it means we have to receive what? Or we have to get the result MR yes. If we wanted to check for no, we would say MR no. If we wanted to check for okay, if there was an okay button, we will say MR okay. So for each modal button, there is a modal result associated to it. Okay? And then now we can do something if the person chose yes. So if the person chose yes, we want to delete this range. So we can say dmod adods1 delete using the method delete. This method will always delete the current ranger. Delete the current ranger. Okay, and then else not want to do anything, so we might as well not code it. We do not want to do anything. Questions? So let's quickly check if our code works. So we are okay, we can be anywhere since we are using a loop to check on the record that we are. So if I say delete a record, it should iterate through all this data until it finds a record that has the name Relebogile. And then once it finds this name, it means we can ask the user to confirm if they want to delete this ranger or not. So let's see if that works. So we are going to say delete a record, and then this pops up. As you can see at the top, it is now written confirm. Why? Because we chose empty confirmation as the type of dialog. And then the message, are you sure you want to delete, comes from the hard-coded literal string there. And then we have the two buttons, yes or no, which come from these buttons which I added on top of my constructor of TMSG buttons. So now we had checked if the person presses yes. Once we press yes, then we are supposed to delete that ranger. So if we press no, the dialog should just dismiss. So automatically it will go. And then once we press yes, Langa should be gone from the data set. So you can see Langa is no longer present. Any questions?
Sir,
Hello?
why is it important to open the data set before deleting a record?
Let's quickly just check if we can delete without opening it. So if I say create a new record, okay, I have to add my record there. So I have let me quickly just add this person again. Okay, the person is inserted. Now let's delete. As you can see, I'm no longer opening my data set. Let's see if it can work. It doesn't want to work. It does not want to work. Maybe probably, let's move to the top. Okay, it does not want to work. Maybe probably because in here we were iterating. Was it in here? Nope, not in there. Also not in there. So as you can see, it does not want to delete So it should have thrown an error or exception there to say we are attempting to delete a record in a closed data set. So according to my understanding, I stand to be corrected. Once a data set finishes its execution, it becomes or it goes to a closed state. I stand to be corrected. But as you can see, we are not able to delete. We are not able to delete. So if I bring this back, try to run it, and then attempt to delete, I think we can be able to delete. Oh, sorry. I think my mistake is here. I'm checking for Relabofile and now the name is Relab. So I'm going to comment that again, save all. Compile this one more time. And then let's try to delete. Okay. So it still allows for deletion of a record, mainly because the data set was still open in there. So as I said, I stand to be corrected. So it seems like we do not have to open the data set, but it's going to be important in cases where initially that data set was never opened before. But if it was opened before, then you do not need to open the data set. I always just do this just to avoid, unnecessary errors. But yes, we can be able to delete without this line. But that is only because the data set is still open somewhere at the top. The data set is still open somewhere at the top there. Yes.
Okay.
All right. Questions?
Sir,
Hello?
do we have to really use the message dialog box there? The message dialog in order for us to confirm whether we are updating, deleting our data.
Okay, this will depend on the question. If the question says before you delete, ask the user to confirm first, then you have to use a message dialog. But if now they don't say anything about a message dialog, then you can just choose to use a show message just for displaying purposes. So in this case, a question is going to be your guider, your guardian. Yeah, your guardian. The question is going to be your guardian. Yeah. Any other questions? Comments? All right, so let's quickly just recap on what we did on the delete part. So on the delete part, we did not want to delete any record that we are currently pointing at. So rather what we did was to iterate through all the records while we are in search of a particular person. So in this case, we are looking for this particular person called Relab. And then once we find that this person is there on a particular record, then we want to remove that entire record using the delete method. So now we also said before we delete, let us ask the user to confirm if indeed they want to delete that particular range. So we used a message dialog, and then we said because we can get the results coming from either this button or that button, let us put it on an if statement to check if the modal result that is being returned by one of these buttons equates to an MR yes. Now, if that is the case, then that is when we can delete that ranger. Okay. Awesome. Any questions, concerns, suggestions, anything that you want to say before we adjourn? Seems like it's already 5, so stop the recording quickly.